Hello everyone, and welcome to our research presentation on the association between extroversion, neuroticism, music listening styles, and well-being in college students. Before beginning our own research, we had to look into previous findings relating personality traits and music listening styles. One of the more interesting articles we found was from Premusic and colleagues in 2009. They found that individuals with higher neuroticism scores tended to report using music for emotional regulation more often than those with lower scores. Also, those higher in extroversion tended to use music for the purpose of background distraction or background noise more frequently than those with lower extroversion scores. Another interesting finding came from Vela and Mills in 2017. They reported that those high in extroversion tended to use music inactively and that those higher in neuroticism scores tended to use music more actively. For the next aspect of our research, we had to look at previous findings that related personality and well-being, the first of which being from Rourke and Hogan in 2016. They reported that music used for the purpose of reminiscing helped increase perceived well-being. Another interesting finding came from Hanser and colleagues in 2016. They found that the use of music for altering mood contributed to an increased well-being. Kwan and Clift in 2018 also found that actively listening to music to regulate emotions contributed to an increased well-being in their participants. And finally, Randall and Rickard in 2017 reported listening to music for background purposes also led to an increased mood or well-being in their participants. Based on the findings of the researchers previously mentioned, we ended up coming up with two different research questions. The first of which being, can differences in the big five personality traits, specifically extroversion and neuroticism, predict active or inactive music listening in college students? Our second research question was, what is the association between music listening style and perceived well-being?
Stemming from our research questions, we came up with 6 hypotheses, focused on personality traits, neuroticism, and extroversion. The first one being, high neuroticism scores will be positively correlated with active listening and inversely related to inactive music listening. The second, extroversion scores will be positively correlated with inactive listening and inversely related to active listening. Third, high neuroticism scores will be positively correlated with listening to music for emotional regulation and inversely related to listening to music in the background. The fourth, extroversion scores will be positively correlated to listening to music as background music and inversely related to using music for emotional regulation. Fifth, high levels of extroversion will be positively correlated with increased perceived well-being. And lastly, neuroticism scores will be inversely related to perceived well-being.
After studying previous research and forming our research questions and hypotheses, we then moved on to the methods section, which includes participants, procedure, materials, and design. Our participants were recruited for this study through social media and the SONA Research Participant Management System. The different social media platforms that we used were Twitter, Snapchat, and Instagram. We created a flyer that included the QR code, which was a direct link to the study, and information about the study. Students that participated in the study through SONA received 0.5 research participation credit that could go towards a psychology course that they were enrolled in for the spring 2020 semester. We were able to obtain 69 participants for this study, 20 male and 49 female. These participants are currently enrolled as undergraduate students at the University of Mount Union, all over the age of 18. The sample consisted of education levels with 22 freshmen, 14 sophomores, 12 juniors, and 19 seniors. The majority of the participants were white and had a mean age of 20 years. Our study included informed consent and debriefing forms, along with a brief demographic questionnaire, which included gender, age, class standing, ethnicity, and favorite music genre. As you can see on this slide, Table 1 shows the participants' favorite music genre. This table shows genres identified by participants, how many participants selected each genre, and the percentage based on the total amount of participants. We collected our data by giving the participants a survey that consisted of an informed consent form, a demographics form, 4 measures in the form of a questionnaire and a debriefing form, all through SurveyMonkey. The first survey that we used was the Big 5 Inventory by Soto and John 2017. This was made up of 60 items on a 5-point scale from 1, disagree strongly, to 5, agree strongly. 30 of the items from this questionnaire were recoded, meaning that they were reversed scored. The domains were extroversion, agreeableness, conscientiousness, negative emotion, and open-mindedness. Each subscale contains 12 items. Total subscale scores range from 12 to 60, with higher scores indicating stronger expression of the trait. The participants then completed the music engagement questionnaire, which is made up of 32 items responding to a 5-point scale from 1, not at all, to 5, very much. There were 5 subscales: daily, 5 items; emotion, 8 items; perform, 6 items; consume, 6 items; respond, 2 items; and prefer, 5 items. Subscores were calculated by adding the score of each subscale and dividing it by the number of items. The higher the score means the higher music engagement in that area. The third measurement was the EPOC measurement of adolescent well-being. The questionnaire has 20 items and is scored on a 5-point scale from 1, almost never, to not at all, to 5, almost always, very much like me. The 5 domains of this questionnaire were engagement, perseverance, optimism, connectedness, and happiness. Each subscale contains 4 items. The subscale scores are the results of averaging responses to the 4 items, and the higher the score means reflecting an increased well-being. This measurement was created by Kern, Benson, Steinberg, and Steinberg in 2016. Lastly, the Adaptive Function of Music Listening Scale by Groark and Hogan in 2018 is a 46-item scale with 11 subscales: stress regulation, 4 items; strong emotional experience, 6 items; rumination, 4 items; sleep, 2 items; reminiscence, 4 items; anger regulation, 7 items; anxiety regulation, 7 items; awe and appreciation, 3 items; loneliness regulation, 3 items; cognitive regulation, 2 items; and identity, 4 items. Items 17 and 37 were reverse coded, and the responses were scored opposite. The scores from each subscale were averaged, and the subscale with the higher mean scores indicated what people experienced when listening to music. Our design used a quasi-experimental design using median splits on the 5 subscales of the Big 5 Inventory: open-mindedness, conscientiousness, extroversion, agreeableness, and neuroticism, and overall score for well-being. We used an independent samples t-test to compare groups defined as high or low in the Big 5 personality traits and well-being. Participants that were willing to participate in the study received the link via email, social media, QR code, or through SONA. After doing so, participants proceeded to complete the questionnaire through SurveyMonkey. They began by completing the informed consent form, which explained why they were taking the survey. After consenting to participate, participants completed demographic items. They then completed the 4 measurements: the first, Big 5 Inventory; second, the Music Engagement Questionnaire; third, the EPOC measure of adolescent well-being; and finally, the Adaptive Functions of Music Listening Scale. After completion of these items, participants were shown the debriefing form, and that included participation. Our contact information was available on the debriefing form for any questions or concerns that participants may have. Participants that signed up through SONA were then able to receive the 0.5 research participation credit. To complete the survey from beginning to finish took around 20 minutes.
Now moving into the result portion of our study. First off, for descriptive statistics, we first calculated the Big Five personality trait subscale scores and composite epoch scores of well-being. We also created high and low groups for each independent variable using a median split, and found the mean and standard deviation for each dependent variable for each subscale on each independent variable. And those are included within the handout file. Moving on to the analysis, the correlations between the Big Five traits and well-being is what we were trying to look for. We did this by using independent samples t-tests with each Big Five personality trait as well as well-being. And the complete results of these tests are included in the handout file. We found significant results for all 5 personality traits, relating those high and low in each specific trait to how they use music. For extroversion, participants higher in extroversion reported using music for anger, anxiety, and cognitive regulation more than those lower in extroversion. And then participants higher in neuroticism reported using music for experiencing strong emotions and rumination than those lower in neuroticism. Participants then higher in agreeableness reported using music for anger and anxiety regulation, awe, performance, consumption, and response than those lower in agreeableness. Our participants then higher in conscientiousness reported using music for performance than participants lower in conscientiousness. And for open-mindedness, this is actually where we found the most significant values. Participants higher in open-mindedness were more likely to report using music daily, experiencing emotion with music, performing, consuming, responding, and preferring music, using music for stress, sleep, anger, anxiety, and loneliness regulation, and to form identity more than those lower in open-mindedness. In addition to looking at the relationship between the Big Five personality traits and uses of music, we also looked at the Big Five personality traits in well-being. We found significant positive correlations with extroversion in well-being, and also a positive relationship with conscientiousness and well-being. Both of these significant values were less than 0.01. We also found a significant negative correlation to well-being with neuroticism, also at a significant value of less than 0.01. And then 2 non-significant correlations with agreeableness and well-being and open-mindedness and well-being, and those significant values were well above 0.05.
The goal of our study was to investigate if differences in the Big Five personality traits, specifically extroversion and neuroticism, can predict active or inactive music listening in college students. As well as this, we wanted to find the association between listening styles, specifically active and inactive listening, and one's perceived well-being. As for the personality trait of extroversion, we hypothesized that it would be positively correlated with inactive music listening and inversely correlated with active music listening. Our hypothesis was not supported, as extroversion does not have a positive correlation with inactive music listening. Our research findings showed that those with higher scores in extroversion tended to listen to music actively to regulate feelings of anger and anxiety more so than those scoring low in extroversion. Our findings go against previous research done by Bella and Mills in 2017. In terms of well-being, our research indicated a significant positive relationship between the personality trait of extroversion and well-being. As for the personality trait of neuroticism, we hypothesized that neuroticism would be positively correlated with inactive music listening and inversely correlated with active listening. Our findings supported the research done by Vella and Mills in 2017, which suggests that personality type is related to music listening style. We found that participants who scored high in neuroticism tend to use music for expressing strong emotions and for rumination more so than those who scored lower in neuroticism. Our data also shows that those with high scores in neuroticism use music actively to gain an emotional response and to ruminate. In terms of well-being, we found a significant negative correlation between neuroticism and well-being. Additionally, our research indicated several significant differences between participants scoring high in the personality trait of open-mindedness and those scoring lower in open-mindedness. These findings are an area in need of further study.
In finishing our research, we found several limitations, first starting with our sample contained only 69 participants. With more participants, our results may be more accurate and conclusive. Our sample also had mostly white participants, which does not accurately represent the demographics of Mount Union. Lastly, our research focused on personality traits and neuroticism and extroversion, with less of a focus on agreeableness, open-mindedness, and conscientiousness. But not emphasizing these three personality traits could limit significant findings in relation to music listening styles and perceived well-being. In the future, researchers should determine what specific factors an individual must possess to be labeled as an inactive or active listener. Lastly, as mentioned before, researchers should examine all Big Five personality traits to discover significant results regarding listening styles and perceived well-being.